Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that, at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. This is Jen Ross, your AgriTourist podcast host. Thank you for joining me for part 2 of my visit to Robin Hill Farm Vineyards, where I had the opportunity to meet Shelby Watson-Hampton in person. And not only did I get to connect with Shelby in person, but she invited several other inspirational local farm women to the table for a fun evening of conversation, wine, snacks, and book discussion. Thank you, Shelby, for coordinating this wonderful evening of connection. I look forward to many more of these. Enjoy my conversations with some fantastic women, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Next is Jennifer Harris, who manifested her way from a farm in Washington State to Washington, D.C. Jennifer has always asked, what is behavior change and how does communications play a role in that? Hence, her career has been focused in communications in the government sector, specifically focused on agriculture and the environment. Enjoy my conversation with Jennifer. So Jennifer, give me a little bit about your background. I know you said you were from Washington State, so
Yes.
That's far away from here.
Yes.
So give me your background.
So I grew up in Washington State on the eastern side of the state. So when people think of Washington State, they normally think about Seattle and rain and lots of woods
what
and
I think
mountains.
about.
And that is not the
And
case.
apples. I do
and
think
a lot of
about
apples.
apples.
Yeah,
Yes.
we produce a lot of apples, and we did growing up where I grew up in eastern Washington State. But if you drive just about 3 hours east, you're going to come down out of the Cascades. You're going to come into the Columbia River Valley, and it looks like a desert. And the Columbia River Gorge is known for its vistas and its views, and it's very, very different landscape. And so where I grew up was kind of in this desert ridge up above the Columbia River Valley.
Okay.
And there were tons and tons of farms there. All kinds of, wheat, potatoes, hay, corn. Anywhere you looked, farms for miles. And so my farm was about 15 miles out of a town called Ephrata, Washington. That town was about 4,000 people. I think it's still maybe around that today. It's not big. And, my best friend lived an hour away in the same county in the same school district. So very rural, very isolating if you're an extrovert like me. So that was a little bit of a challenge growing up. But we had a kind of a small family farm. We shared it it was split between my dad and my uncle, kind of co-farmed together.
Okay.
My dad was also a teacher. He was also a military reservist. He served in Vietnam. He was in the Navy for 25 years. So we had a lot going on in terms of my dad and what his roles were. But he would help my uncle in the summer. My uncle was the primary, employee of the farm. And then my dad had revenue sources elsewhere. But during the summer, that was when all the work happened. So summer break was not break. It was go to work time.
So how did you get to Maryland?
So I had a lot of time to think growing up about where else I could go. Funny story. When I was in 8th grade, I had always been a good speller, but our district was the one school district that did not participate in the regional spelling bee. And I had a dream that I wanted to go to Washington, D.C. because I thought it was just this really amazing place that, could just open my eyes to a whole different world. And I'd always enjoyed going to Seattle to visit my great grandmother. She grew up in North Dakota, lived to 98 years old. still has her house in downtown Seattle. It's like a mountain cafe now. I think two sisters own it. It's
Wow.
really cool. But she went from a farm to the city. And whenever I got to visit her in the summer, I was like, I want to be in a city. And I really liked Washington, D.C. from all the pictures I took. So I lobbied the student council, and I actually ended up running for the student council and got them to pay the fee for us to be part of the spelling bee. And then I won the regional spelling bee. And then I went to Washington,
Wow.
D.C. when I was in 13. And
So you got yourself there.
Yeah,
That's pretty impressive.
I looked at Washington, D.C. as like my goal, but I didn't know how I was going to make the steps work.
Okay.
So fast forward to my senior year of high school, I got the internship at the Soil Conservation Service in town. I worked for a woman who was running the regional advisory work that they do. They have an area engineer who advises farmers on best practices. And she took me around all over Eastern Washington State, and I learned about different practices. She said, if you want to work in agriculture and you want to be an engineer, Washington State University is great. And I know your parents went there and they really want you to go there, but I think Cornell would be a fabulous opportunity for you. And it might get you to where you really want to go, which is the city. And I said, oh, how do I do that? So I talked to my guidance counselor, who didn't think I could get in and wasn't very encouraging, but my parents said, go ahead and apply, because you never know. If you get in, it's an opportunity of a lifetime. And if you don't, oh, well, Washington State University is it's a pretty solid school for agriculture, and you can go there. So, I did get admitted. I got enough scholarship money to go. My parents put me on a plane, and I went to upstate New York, and I loved it because it was a nice transition from where I was at. It wasn't too big. It was 12,000 undergraduates, 3 times the size of my little town, but I felt like I was going somewhere.
Yep. Yeah. It's a beautiful area too of New York State. So.
It is. It didn't feel overwhelming. It felt, Ithaca, New York, if you've ever been there, feels beautiful. Like a place that, I could easily go from the farm to there and feel comfortable. But the funny thing is, when I showed up, my advisor said to me, we're so happy that we finally have a farm girl in the program again. I said, what do you mean you don't have farm kids? He goes, all of our kids come from New York City. They come to the school to go to engineering degrees.
That's what they said to you?
College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. He said, I remember you wrote your essay about how you raise sheep on a family farm and what that taught you about hard work and life. And he said that essay stood out to us so much, and we were so excited. He said that your application stood out for that reason. I had no idea. I just answered a question about my life. I didn't know college admissions back then was very different, but I was just very honest about who I was, and I thought that's what they wanted. He said, that's exactly what we wanted. So I landed there, and then eventually went to Cornell in Washington my junior year and spent a semester on Capitol Hill working and interning at the Library of Congress, looking at wetland mitigation, looking at Clean Water Act policy, fell in love with the whole idea of doing something different with my life, and landed in Washington, D.C. after I graduated.
So you landed where you wanted to be.
Where I wanted to be, but that's the story of how I got there. I think manifesting your destiny, there is something to that. I don't quite know how it works. I've read a lot about it, but I think in my younger years, I did manifest a different life. And I think I had different influences from my great grandmother to the woman that I interned for, to a couple of really special teachers who believed in me, who kind of all directed me towards the path that I went down and where I'm at today.
So where are you at today?
So where I'm at today, this is a long story. I'm sorry.
It's a great story.
I'm in communications, so I do what you do. You can talk to me for an hour, and I'll probably.
I love the story, and I love the way you manifested it. And the thing is, young people don't always you knew Washington D.C., and a lot of people can't even get to that. They don't have that kind of focus. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty impressive, from a farm girl.
Right. But you think about farming and what it requires. And if you've ever lived and worked and breathed on a farm like I did, you grew up at, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. The school bus comes at 6:30 a.m. You got to feed the animals. You got to do your chores. You got to get yourself ready. For me, I was the oldest child. I'm getting my little sisters ready, and I'm helping everybody get out the door. It takes an hour and a half to get to school on the school bus. Then you go to school all day. You come home, and it's more chores and it's more work. And summer break, like I hinted before, was not summer break. It was get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, start moving the irrigation pipes on the fields for the hay. Then you go, you've got to feed the animals. We had a vegetable garden. We had a little mini orchard. We had vines. We had all sorts of animals. Everything had to be taken care of. It had to be nurtured. And that was a 7-day-a-week job pretty much. And my dad really wanted boys, but he had 3 girls. And so we were the farm workers. And we were raised that way. But that discipline and that level of responsibility that you have to have growing up in that environment taught me everything I needed to know. In fact, I credit my success today to being able to have that work ethic instilled in me.
So what are you doing today?
I'm a chief communications officer for Charles County government, but I've always been doing some form of communication. I've been down here about 7.5 years. I've lived in the Brandywine, Maryland area for 22 years. My husband and I got married. We met in Northern Virginia, got married, and realized real estate was really pricey in Northern Virginia on government salary. So we really liked a little bit more the quieter lifestyle down here. It reminded me of home, like being able to come home and then rise up to your place of peace. That felt good, even though I was working in Northern Virginia and I had done that for a long time. I worked for City of Alexandria, I worked for Arlington Public Schools. You want to come home and feel like you can, sink into a place that feels good. And being down here in the home that we've built here and raised our family here is feels good.
What do you love about your job?
I love a lot of things about my job. I always tell people, going to an Ivy League institution, it's really instilled into you that you should go do, something great and maybe make a lot of money and make a big name for yourself. For me, what appealed to local government, and I was very fortunate. My first job, really in Washington, D.C. was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, rolling out recycling programs with big cities across the country and teaching them how to communicate behavior change. And that's really got what, I went from agricultural and environmental studies at Cornell into this job where really it was more about studying how humans can change their minds about something. Now, my husband grew up in and around New York City, and he was like, if you can't make it easier for me to throw something away than to put it in a recycle bin, if I have to overthink it, it's going to be really hard for me to understand why I should do it. And so that's what got me curious about what is behavior change and how does communications play a role in that? Well, also, again, everything goes back to a story in my childhood, because I also started out in 4-H and I went on to Future Farmers of America. And guess what I was doing during all of that time? I was doing public presentations at the county fair. I was competing in competitions in Future Farmers of America about marketing and about how to, make agriculture knowledge accessible to everybody. And so I was always curious about that. So I said, well, how can I marry these things that I'm naturally good at, talking and marketing and communicating, with the things that I love? And that job was perfect for me because it taught me everything I needed to know. But what I was disappointed in about that job is I would fly into a city, I would spend a couple days, and then I would leave. And I'd fly into another city, spend a couple days, and I'd leave. And you don't get to really see the progress of like putting work into something and seeing it grow and build, kind of like a farm. Yep. So yes. I got an offer from the City of Alexandria to become the recycling coordinator, and I fell in love with that job because I lived there, I worked there, I walked to City Hall there, and it became like I knew my neighbors. It was like a small town within a bigger city. And so that eventually led a long twisting path to where I'm at today. But I've always been in some way, shape, or form involved in communicating with people about issues that I care about.
How did you connect with Shelby and this vineyard? Hey, it's Jen, your agritourism podcast host. I need to interrupt this podcast for a few seconds. I always want to support the people I interview. So if you're planning on visiting the Berkshires this summer and fall season, Dory Schofield, owner of Berkshire Farm Sanctuary and Save a Pet on Long Island, and myself have partnered up to help her create an agri destination at her sanctuary. We are starting small with 5 exciting chocolate cocktail hours for all of you chocolate lovers out there. You'll start with a chocolate mocktail or a cocktail and indulge in some delicious charcuterie, plant-based of course. Then you will be guided through a chocolate experience and learn how chocolate is made from bean to bar. Savor the tastes of real chocolate from all around the world and depart the farmhouse with some of your favorite chocolate bars in hand. Proceeds support all of Dory's rescued animals at the sanctuary. Remember, there are only 5 dates starting Saturday, July 5th, and once they're booked, that's it. So visit berkshirefarmsanctuary.org or heartbeatfarms.com to register now. Thank you for listening, and I will hand you back over to the podcast.
Well, again, it's different points in life that connect you to the people. Here, I really value relationships, and it doesn't matter if you're the person, who takes my ticket at the parking garage that I park at City Hall at every day, or it's the grocery store clerk who checks me out every Sunday after church, or it's the person who's at the counter here at the winery. I always love wine because we had a class at Cornell, wines that seniors all got to take, and it was really exciting.
The funny thing is you guys mentioned that before, and I'm like, someone just told me about that.
That wine class has been going on for
I know.
decades.
It just came up in a conversation recently.
It's infamous, and a couple of my friends moved down to this area along with me, and we had one of them was fortunate enough. We were fortunate enough that he worked at Calvert Woodley as kind of a side hustle and became a wine buyer for them and would bring wines for us to taste so we could continue the tradition. That turned into tasting wines in Northern Virginia vineyards, which turned into tasting tasting wines in other places to now we take trips to Europe and taste wine for fun because we're at that place in life where we can. But getting back to meeting Shelby, I always love supporting who's in my backyard. I'm really that person who grew up in a small town and still treats the place that I live, and that's why I've been here for 22 years as my small town. And so I had been patronizing a vineyard down the street who had a winery, small family-owned winery, and they told us about Robin Hill. And we came in here, must have been not very long after they opened. Immediately met Bob and Susan, really became friendly with them, enjoyed our time, and we would bring friends here all the time, which they loved. It builds their business too.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, Shelby's a natural part of that because she's at the counter greeting us too. And it just became this thing where as our kids grew up, we'd swim meets every Saturday and we'd come here after swim meets, and they knew we were coming here to just get our glass of wine before we go home and take our afternoon nap after a hot morning working on the pool deck. And they knew that story about us, and then it just grew into a friendship where we actually came here. My husband and I came here last summer and helped them do a private tasting of their Generation series that they launched and helped them write the tasting notes. So that's how close we are. Like, we are not just patrons of the winery. We are part of the winery. We help them with harvest. We help them with tasting notes. Bob gives me the wine suitcase when I travel to wherever I'm going to bring back wine for him, which I'm happy to do. I love that. And so we show this passion for wine and the farm life, and I think we connect on a variety of levels.
Yeah, I can see that. This place is amazing. When I pulled up the driveway, I was like, wow. Just talking to her on the podcast, I'm not saying she didn't do it justice, but when you're here, there's a whole different feeling.
I just came from work and I felt stressed right up until I pulled into the vineyard. Yes. And whenever I pull into the vineyard, I start to feel peace right away. And there is something about this space and this place that feels peaceful, even if you're working. I don't mind coming out here on, Saturday morning at 7 a.m. and helping them with the harvest because I feel peace here in a way that I can't really, it's kind of like contained here. I can't really even find it anywhere else, besides my own home, which I insist on peace there.
I know.
You can't get it there. Where else can you get it, right?
Well, it was a pleasure meeting you.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
I love what you've done. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Excellent. Sydney Garner grew up on a 3,500-acre generational conventional family grain farm that grew corn, soybeans, and wheat. These three products are not direct-to-consumer products and get a bad rap at times. Sydney taught us about the growing and uses of these products and how her farm works to ensure that their farming and production does not impact the local bays, something that the state of Maryland requires, and all other states don't. Enjoy my insightful conversation with Sydney. Sydney. So Sydney, where are you from?
I'm from Southern Charles County. I grew up on a about 3,000 acre family grain operation, very conventional grain farm. So, yeah.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about that. So you grew up on this farm. So This is a family business?
It is a generational business. Dad, grandfather, mom, me, my brother, very involved. Traditional. My dad works an off the farm job. My grandfather did before he retired. My brother does also. Very core family, doing the farming work with a few older retired guys that help us run equipment. But it is a family operation, long hours. I like to ride in the tractor as much as I could when I was little. A good day was getting up on a Saturday morning at, 5 years old and getting to go to the little gas station down the street and get a bug juice and then going to sit in the tractor all day with my dad. It was a family operation for sure.
So what is it? Like, what are you producing and what is it for?
Yeah. So we grow corn, soybeans, and wheat.
Okay.
Our wheat was harvested and sold to a mill and got put into snacks, crackers, things like that. And then we did straw out of the wheat stalks.
Okay.
2 for 1. When you're growing wheat, you can make straw out of it, but also selling your wheat. Then we do corn and soybeans, which get sold for different animal feed products. We store and dry on our farm. So supply and demand, we have it in the winter. We're able to truck it outside of peak season for harvest. And then we haul mostly to Richmond, Eastern Shore, Northern Virginia, to the bigger ports.
Okay.
And that's all still family hauling it with a few exceptions of a few.
How many acres are we talking about?
About 3,500, all local in Charles County, half owned, half rented.
Now, is that considered big or not big? Like,
I would say
don't know
it's
for that type of farming.
For this region, it's pretty big.
Okay.
I went to college in Kentucky, and that's fairly small for more out west. But in this region, yeah, it's pretty large.
So, so you are local and you're supplying a lot of local people with these products. Like, I mean, because I know soy, wheat, like it gets a bad name.
It does, because
So
it's not
tell
a
me-
direct to consumer.
yes, okay.
We're not selling sweet
Yes.
corn at the ear at the farmer's
Yes.
market. We're selling grain corn, and we're selling it to a larger market, and that is going to the end user. We truck all of our grains about 3 to 4 hours away. Because there's a few small local grain operations, but at the end of the day, they're just the middleman, and they're hauling to Purdue.
Okay.
Maryland is really regionally important because the Eastern Shore has a lot of chicken houses. So these grain farmers are then able to haul to the Eastern Shore and provide feed for these chicken houses.
Okay.
Most of the grains get made into a chicken feed that the chicken farmers then feed. So
Okay. Excellent. And is this something, so do you want to stay in this business? Like, what is your vision for going forward, for you?
For myself personally, I am really passionate about the agribusiness side of things, the science behind it. All farmers are required to do a nutrient management plan especially in Maryland. It's a state of
Okay.
Maryland requirement
I didn't know
because of
that.
our proximity to the waterways and the bay. And there's a big move to push, clean the bay, keep the bay clean. Farmers are required to get a nutrient management plan written by a certified plan writer. And that's to ensure all of the nutrients that farmers are putting on their land isn't at too high of a level that it's going to hurt the bays, it's going to hurt our soils, it's going to hurt our ecosystem. I would really like to become nutrient management plan certified to be a writer. I had a focus in ag econ in college, and being able to take what I learned there and working on the business side of things. I like to drive the tractor, and I do like to be hands-on, but ideally I would like to run more of the back end side of our business. I do live off the farm. My brother is very much a farmer. My dad is very much the traditional farmer. While I do like to make them lunch on the weekends and go for part runs, I also don't live on the farm and kind of have my own family, and then I am establishing my own cattle operation
Wow.
off
Okay.
site. So
Okay.
yeah.
So that, was it a certification, the nutrition piece that you were talking about? Is that something that every state requires? Or
It's
is it
just a Maryland requirement.
Really?
Yep. I went to college in Kentucky.
That's terrific.
And in our soils class, the example was how Maryland requires this.
Wow.
To make sure farmers are maintaining healthy soils and not contaminating the waterways.
I would want every state, or
Yeah.
at least every state that has a water
Absolutely.
impact. Well, then again, it's probably every state, honestly, because it may not be an ocean, but it could be a river or whatever. That's amazing.
Yeah. Maryland gets a bad rap for farmers, especially contaminating the bay. But in reality, all of these steps are put into place, and the farmers don't want to. The farmers want to preserve the property and preserve their land and the waterways that are helping them produce their products.
Wow. So what do you love? If there's one thing, okay, well, you're going to say riding the tractor, I think. Just one memory, like, of your farm when you reflect back, and even to today, what's the one thing that you really get excited about?
I think on like my family farm that I really grew up on, the one thing that I really enjoyed was just being able to spend that time with my dad and my brother and my grandpa. And maybe it was at a really young age, but every summer I would go with my dad and we would do straw bales, and I would ride my four-wheeler alongside my dad who was in the baler, or my brother who was in the bale stack wagon. As they were picking up the bales, if the bales were flipped the wrong way, the equipment wouldn't pick it up right. So before I was old enough to really help, I would ride my four-wheeler next to them and just flip the bales to make sure it was right and make sure they were efficient.
That sounds fun.
Most of my summers were spent like that. My brother and I we had a Polaris Ranger and we had a radio in it. And my brother and I would play with the radio and try to guess what station he was on in the tractor versus what I was on in the Ranger.
I love it. And my last question is, how do you know Shelby? Like, what's your connection to Shelby or the vineyard?
Yeah. So I work as an economic development professional in agriculture. Okay. I'm an agricultural specialist, and I work directly with Shelby and Smatic in that capacity. As a kid, I was really involved in the Southern Maryland Invitational Livestock Expo and 4-H and youth organizations with that, where SMATIC had a pretty direct hand. So definitely meeting Shelby in a lot of different realms. I think she told me my family rents some of her family's property to farm. So yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Very inspirational. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Caroline Trossbach was born and raised on a fourth-generation Maryland farm, originally a tobacco farm. She is an agricultural development specialist that supports farm businesses in her county. We had such a great discussion about the evolution of farmers markets and why some succeed and others don't, and ultimately why farmers are turning more to agritourism as a replacement for the farmers market model. Caroline also discusses the power of building farm-friend relationships and how invaluable those connections are in today's environment. Enjoy my conversation with Caroline. So Caroline, tell me about your background. Where are you from? Where were you born and raised? And we'll go from there.
Okay. I am born and raised in southern St. Mary's County, Maryland. It's about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and Annapolis. Grew up there, still live on the family farm that I grew up on.
So tell me about the family farm.
I am fourth generation on the farm.
What kind of farm is it?
It's leased out for grains, so corn, wheat, soybeans, that kind of a thing. So unfortunately, my dad passed away before I was born. And so, but he raised tobacco, which was the main cash crop, but also that's the thing. They call it homesteading now, but it was really just how you lived. So it was fruits, vegetables, horses, cattle, pigs, chickens, fruit trees, just everything, so that you could eat and the family could eat. But yeah, he raised tobacco. A lot of my cousins grew up with helping with all the different processes that you need in order to get a good crop. But yeah, no, grew up on the family farm. Lived there, went to college on the eastern shore of Maryland. It's about 3 hours away. But
okay.
Yeah, I remember the Student Government Association president saying, "Have you ever seen so many cornfields in your life?" And I was visiting with one of my friends and it's like, yes, because we both live on farms. We like that rural environment. So it was really neat. So yeah, I know I'm a country mouse, so to speak, but I do like to visit the city every so often.
So when you reflect on your growing up on the farm, what is one of those, something very memorable? Like what is something that comes to mind?
A wide variety. Sometimes it was playing in the barns. They've since fallen down because there's not as much need to have them going on. Sometimes it's waking up in the morning and hearing different animal sounds, and we don't have those animals. So whether it's a rabid fox or the neighbor's cattle that got out, or my cat thankfully he was fine, but my cat getting shot in the head with a crossbow arrow.
Oh no.
So, yeah, it's all sorts of things. Just even this morning, waking up, just hearing the birds, and it's June, so it's finally warm enough where you can have the doors open, but the screen doors closed.
Right. So what do you do now?
I am the agricultural development specialist with Calvert County Government's Department of Economic Development. So I help support agricultural businesses in the county. I do focus on farmers markets, but I do serve all different types of agricultural businesses, whether it's agritourism, grain operations, livestock operations, craft alcohol where they grow the ingredients, just a wide variety. There's even a couple of Christmas tree farms. So that's one thing I do like about Maryland, and specifically Southern Maryland, is just the diversity of crops available. We've had to adapt just because of tobacco was the king crop, the cash crop, the money crop. And so just transitioning out of that, where thankfully a lot of different farmers including my family, have had to transition and focus on a variety of products.
So tell me about farmers markets have evolved.
Yes.
Good and bad. You know, sometimes I feel like by me, where I live, there became too many of them. A lot went under, I'll say. A lot don't really know how to market the market. So what is your experience with farmers markets? Especially, I don't know how long you've been doing that piece, but I feel like there's this evolution going on with farmers markets.
Definitely. And honestly, thank you for saying that, because you think it's just your area, but it's really not. And so we're going through all those pieces where one market is strong, one market is steady, one market is struggling, one market had to be canceled because I don't consider it a farmer's market if no farmers can attend.
Right. And that's been a struggle.
Yes.
We have a lot less farmers, or I'll say traditional farmers, at these markets, by me specifically.
Mm-hmm. I would agree, where it's just, there's only so many farmers, and yes, everybody, I understand why people want a farmer's market, both for the local produce, for the delicious taste, for the health benefits, but also for the placemaking community atmosphere. But just with land access and other issues, there's just, to be blunt, not enough farmers to go around at everywhere where people want a farmer's market. So I've just recently had to try to, in my mind, adapt, where let's at least try to get local food in each of, call them town centers or towns or cities, or just making sure that people do realize that there are farms nearby that are growing food and that you can readily purchase them.
Right.
And trying to minimize barriers for that, for people to purchase that locally grown food.
It's weird because there's no, I don't even know. It's like certain areas, they really work. And the community supports them in a way where the farmer actually leaves making money. Yes. But then other areas, like my town even, we've tried farmers markets and they just do not work. And so I'm like, it's really interesting what's happening. And so I don't know the answer, but I definitely know that in talking to a lot of farmers, they are looking at, bringing people to the farm, agritourism opportunities, you pick opportunities, not just traditional big strawberry farms. I'm talking, one of the books I brought was a farmer in Texas, Megan Neubauer, who is perfecting the art of you pick, but for vegetables. Mm-hmm. And she sells tickets and, and she certain crops, she's got it down to what crops work, what crops don't work. And there are models out there that I know farmers need to adopt. And because not every community is farmers market driven or farm stand driven even.
Correct. And so that's also where we're at, is trying to me, both work, whether it's the market or the farm stand. But yes, it's ultimately the farmer's goal where the operation, whether it's typically or stereotypically, can be more sustainable with people coming to the farm, whether that's the price or whether that's the customers gaining the perspective of the entire experience. It's one thing to see the photos of the delicious food, but it's another to be on the farm and to see that and immerse yourself in that environment and in that experience and gain a new appreciation for it. To me, that point is part of the value added portion of those products.
Yep, absolutely. And just my final question for you is, are there any other observations you're making outside of this, what we were just discussing, just in general, in dealing with this diversity of farms you're dealing with? Any other themes that you're seeing bubble up? Obviously, land access is a big, big thing. Food adversity, food security, insecurity, there's a lot of terms around it. Like anything else that you feel that you're dealing with more so now than ever before? I know that it might be a tough question, but are you hearing any, do you feel that you're seeing any themes with what's going on in the world right now, in the farmers marketplace, that just come to mind? And if not, don't worry, no pressure.
Just a couple of random things spring to mind. I was fortunate last week to experience one of the elementary schools had a market day. So at the end of the second grade economics unit, each student had to be their own entrepreneur. They had to create something. Yes, they had to sell something. And so just hearing their thoughts were so precious, but I don't want to minimize it, but also at the same time, so real world, because they were saying things that it's like, I'm thinking this as an adult. I don't know why people aren't coming by this stand or what. No, you can't give it away because then you don't make money. And
I love that.
Right. So that's definitely one. And then another, also in that same vein, but that it's truly more of an ecosystem where everybody has their niche, but everybody can work together. And so just really trying to work on the fact that you can get through most anything in life with one good friend. So just trying to build and understand what I'll call farm friend relationships, where it doesn't have to be a farmer in the same county or even the same state, but you really do need to connect with somebody, whether it's a similar operation or whether it's completely different, but just to know that, yes, somebody cares about you as a person and how your operation is doing and is willing to brainstorm with you and not be territorial or petty about it, but to be in a growth mindset for both people involved in that relationship.
I think that was extremely insightful and important, especially right now. And I know when I read Shelby's book, that's a theme that comes out of her book. And I think it's so critical, right? Especially right now. So thank you for bringing that up. And I love the elementary, I love the whole kid thing because yes, they're young, but we need to be listening to them, especially because they're in a different generation growing up with the phones that they have and the technology they have. They see the world in a very different way than us. So I think it's really important to be listening to what they're saying and what they're observing.
Yes. So. Whether it's, and it always will reflect on us, whether we want to see that reflection or not.
Yep.
But at the same time that there is value in it and that they are citizens too. Yes. And yes, soon enough they will have purchasing power and they are already starting to form their ideas and opinions and perspectives, and just trying to build on that, where just basically to make them feel safe and part of the community. Yep. And that they do realize that food is an integral part of that and where it comes from.
Excellent. Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sherry Bryant's love for horses started when she was a young girl. She had a lesson with a horse named Tax, and that day a spiritual connection and forever bond with horses was formed. Sherry built a career in accounting, but she knew her life would involve horses. She launched Foxfire Farm, where they do horseback trail riding paired with some wine tasting at the next door vineyard. This is such a creative agritourism venture. Sherry also emphasizes the ethical care of her horses and wants people to know how well taken care of they are. Enjoy my conversation with Sherry.
Hi, I'm Sherry Bryant with Foxfire Farm.
Sherry, it's a pleasure to meet you. So tell me, I want to know a little bit about your background first,
Yes.
Before the farm. If there is a before the farm, I don't know if the farm was part of your background. So tell me.
Pre-farm. So our farm does horseback trail riding. And so
I think that's so, I love what, I want to get into that.
Yes. So pre-farm, when I was 7, right before my 7th birthday, I promise this isn't like sad, but my dad passed away And my mom, I think, was trying to find something to get me interested in to kind of take my mind off of it. And so she tried, like tap and jazz and ballet and gymnastics. And I am not very coordinated. So none of that really stuck. But then I remember vividly when she took me to my first horseback riding lesson when I was 7. And the first horse I ever rode, his name was Tax, because he was born on April 15th, which was hilarious foreshadowing, because I am also, as an adult, I'm a CPA. So that kind of like all came full circle. I love it. And so I remember my first lesson, and I remember being like, oh, this is a thing. Like I'm hooked.
What was it? What do you think it was?
I think it was just, horses are really spiritual beings, and they're really just magical, I think. And I think it was the connection of, it was not only just something physical to do to kind of take my mind off of it, but it was the connection with the horse themselves. And, all week I couldn't wait to go see Tax, for my lesson. And I just really formed a bond with him. And then, every horse after that. And there have been so many special horses throughout the years. My mom was a single mom. So, horseback riding can kind of get expensive. So, through the years, I did pony club and 4-H, and, worked for various riding instructors, feeding, filling hay nets, scooping poop, scrubbing water buckets, wherever I could do to kind of earn time in the saddle. I spent my birthday and Christmas money on my first horse when I was, I want to say 10, and had him for a few years. And
what happened to Tax?
Tax, Tax, as far as I know, I like to think he's still teaching lessons. We won't. But we ended up moving, and so after a couple of years of lessons with Tax, I moved, and I just perpetually he's in my mind teaching kids lessons. So I had my first horse from like age 10 to 13, and then again my mom being a single mom, like it just wasn't sustainable. So when that ended, I was able to, find other barns that would let me kind of, volunteer my time in exchange for lessons or time in the saddle. And then when I got into college,
where'd you go?
First to UF, and then I graduated from USF, University of South Florida. And when I got into college, I kind of really said, like, what can I get a degree in that's going to pay me enough that I can afford a horse? So it was a means to an end. Education is never a means to an end. I had a great college experience, but I was very focused in like why I'm here and what I'm here to do, which is to find a career that
a lot of people aren't.
Right. Yeah. It was always focused on having a farm and a horse. And so I landed on accounting, got my bachelor's and my master's degree in accounting.
I have an accounting degrey, by the way.
Do you really?
Yes.
Okay.
That was my degree in college.
Yeah. So
I sat for my CPA and I walked out.
Yes. I know. I understand why.
Now I do marketing.
Yes. There were times where I walked out. I was like, I did not pass that section.
It was a good discipline to learn in college, but I just knew that it wasn't for me. But I appreciate every accountant out there.
So I really I like accounting. I enjoy
That's great.
it. But it's not, it's certainly not like what makes my heart sing the way that like, farming and horses do. But it was something I was like, it's a career where I can like, kind of make my own hours. Yep. And it's really been, it's been a career that has treated me well. And so even still now I have 2 days a week that my specialty is nonprofit accounting. So I do 2 days a week
So
in the nonprofit accounting world, like a CFO for hire, fractional CFO work. But I've been able to scale back as, from like 5 days a week, and now I'm at 2. So I can spend more time with my kid and on the farm and all that.
So tell me about the farm.
So with the farm, I had, when I turned 29, had kind of a revelation, and I was like, you know what, life's short, I'm going to get the horse. So did that, and I was married to my ex-husband at the time, who was supportive of it, and we lived in D.C. at the time, and I boarded my horse out in Brandywine. And then we happened upon this little farm in Bowie And we kind of were like, wouldn't it be funny if, ha ha ha, and then we ended up buying him. And so we bought this, it was like 5 acres. And it was just to have, my horse and, maybe like a husband horse type thing. So we had that, and then we separated amicably, and I met my current husband. And when we met, he pulled up to the farm, my farm in Bowie, first date, and was like, oh, I think I got catfished. I'm going to be like murdered. Like, there's no way, like, this is where this woman lives, because, you pull up, it was like a 1878, like clapboard farmhouse with like a barn with like a cow skull on it. And I was like, I told you I live on a farm. He's like, I thought you just meant you had a big backyard. I was like, no, it's a farm. So he did not have any background in anything agricultural, farming, horses. And, he was like, I think I went on one pony ride when I was a kid. And so I was like, well, would you like to go?
You had one horse at the time.
I had 2 at the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I boarded, I had like our barn was like a 4-stall barn.
Okay.
4-stall barn. So I had like my friend's horse there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had 2 and then my friend's horse. And so I was like, well, would you ever want to go for a trail ride? Because trail riding was like the main thing I did. He was like, yeah, my husband, he's like generally looking for a reason to say yes. Like he's down for everything. He's like, yeah, I'm down. And so we went, and, I remember, normally when you bring somebody who's not a horsey person along with you on a trail ride, you're like, oh, you expect to kind of do everything, right? You're just glad somebody's willing to spend the time with you doing the thing you like to do. So I expected, to do the hitching up the trailer and, loading and unloading and tacking up and grooming. And I expected to just kind of do it all while he hung out. And I was just glad to have the company. And I remember throughout the whole time, he was like, well, what are you doing there? Well, why do you do that? Well, how do you do it? And I was like,
he was interested.
Yeah. And my ex-husband was not. And so I think I had like that mindset, and I was like, you don't have to like worry. I can do it. This is already a done deal. Like, you don't have to pretend to be interested, And he was like, no, I'm really interested. And I started showing him, and we went for a couple trail rides, and he loved it. Like, he just really fell in love with it. And I remember, so he was a firefighter for the Air Force, and we had different schedules. And so a couple months into dating, he was like, hey, I'm off today. What if I come by your house and cook some dinner and it's ready when you get home? And I was like, yeah, that would be so nice. So I get home, I walk through the door, he hands me a drink, he's cooking dinner. And I was like, wow, ooh la la, what is this? And I was like, wow, this is so nice. It's so nice to be taken care of. And I was like, I'm going to go feed the horses real quick, and I'll be back before you're finished dinner. He's like, oh, I already did that. And I was like, what do you mean you did that? And he was like, oh, I already fed them. And I was like, what did you feed them? Because you can't just feed horses a hamburger. Like, what did you feed them? And so I started to panic. And he was like, well, you had that feed chart, on the wall in the feed room. And I'm
impressed.
I came along with you that time you fed, and I just fed them what was on the feed chart. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's a keeper. And so that's where I was like, okay, he's into it. And so we ended up, getting married, and obviously, because you don't let that go. And so that's when we found there was a farm listed on Facebook. It was 20 acres in Brandywine. And once again, was like, wouldn't it be funny if, and we went and looked at it, and then we bought it. And so the farm had a setup for a professional, actual equine operation. And so our intention when we first bought the farm, and we named it Foxfire Farm, we had an inside joke about foxes, and then he was a firefighter. So that's how that went.
Like that.
Not to be confused with Firefox the browser, but so Foxfire Farm. And when we first bought it, we were just going to be a boarding barn, but we both loved the trail riding. That's what we were doing on the weekends when we had free time. We'd go, trailer out and go to we have great local parks around here. So we would go ride, and we like wine. So we would trail ride and have wine. And so it just happened that the farm adjacent to ours came on the market, and it had a lot of extra land. It was a small house, the structure, the facilities were not there, at the 20 acre farm, but the land, opened up some possibilities for us to have a trail ride business, which was something I'd always wanted to do. And then Chris was like all in. And so we did some kind of voodoo magic. I don't know what, but we ended up being able to figure out how to make it work to purchase that place. And that's when we sat down with, so when we bought the 20-acre place, we came to look at it and we saw it was right next door to a winery. And we were like, okay, I don't know that being next door to a winery is like the reason to buy a place, but it's not a reason to buy this place. Like, this is pretty great. And so we'd already, made friends with.
I was going to say,
Janie.
were they good? Because, you want to make sure it's the right people.
They were lovely. Their names are Jane and Mark. The winery is called Jane Mark. So we'd already made friends with Janie and Mark. And, because we'd already lived, in the 20-acre place for about a year at this point before the one next door came up in the market. And so once that came on the market and we bought it, I messaged Janie and I said, I have a idea for you. And I thought, there's no way she's going to go for this. But I was like, I thought maybe we could come up with like I have an idea for cross promotion with the horses and the wine. And I thought she was going to say no, but she was like, come over and have a glass of wine and talk about it. And I was like, okay. So we went over, he had a glass of wine. I was like, here's what I'm thinking. Like, we create this whole, and it was right as COVID was happening and people were really looking for a reason or a way to kind of get out of the house, get out and do something social that kind of provided social distance, you're kind of naturally social distance on a horse, 6 feet apart. And so people were looking for things to do outside to get them out of the house, especially, with lockdown conditions. And so I was thinking we could do this whole experience where, they could go for a horseback trail ride and then come and have a wine tasting. And I was like, no way. And she was like, I'm in. So a thing I didn't know about Janie was she grew up as a horse girl. And so she grew up, she farmed a lot with her grandfather growing up, and she had ponies growing up, and she rode a lot. And so she really loves horses. And I think she kind of missed that aspect of, her life. And so she's like, I would love to have horses here. And so I was like, okay. So we started, we hand cut the trails through our property. When we bought the property, I think about 60 years worth of garbage had been thrown into the woods. I don't think it had ever been taken to the dump or picked up by the trash people. So they had thrown that in the woods. So we started by taking 3 or 4, like 25 or 30 yard roll-off containers worth of garbage out of the woods that we got out there by hand and did. And then we hand cut the trails. And we opened up on Black Friday of 2020. So when everybody else was like racing for TV deals and things like that, we were like, oh, this is the day we're going to do it. And it took us like 5 months to close. We thought it was going to be a quick process. It was not. At that time, I was exceptionally pregnant by the time it finally went through. And so I couldn't lead the trail rides at the time. I rode all the way through like my, 8th month, but this was like month 9. And I was like, I can't do it anymore. And so I was trusting my husband, who was a brand new rider. He only started riding when he met me. And our farm manager at the time, who had a dressage background but no background in trail riding, to lead our first trail rides. And that was an interesting experience. First trail ride, horses got loose. It was a thing, but we have refined our processes and procedures since then. And for the last 4.5 years, it's been a really incredible experience that we're able to kind of share what we love with the people in the community.
So people really what has been the response?
People love it. Yeah.
I was intrigued when you were talking about it.
Yeah. It's funny because I always ask, whenever I guide a ride, I always ask like, so how did you find out about us? Or how did you find us? And they're always like, well, I was specifically Googling horseback riding with wine. I was like, really? Because and they're like, and nobody does it. And then we found you. I was like, that's great. So, so we opened up the trail rides. People have really loved it. We've built on that a little bit. We we've kind of come up with all kinds of, fun things to do on horseback. We've done a mounted Easter egg hunt, a mounted trick-or-treating. We've done date night experience, which we used to do every week. Now we're kind of doing it a little bit more limited, but basically you go for like a sunset trail ride. And then we do like charcuterie around the bonfire afterwards. But our main thing is certainly the horseback trail riding with the wine tasting. We do offer also a little bit of like a longer private ride for more experienced people that allows them to kind of get out and trot or canter, which is a little bit of a rarer thing on horseback trail rides.
I love it.
So we try to kind of cater to, people who want to try unique things on horseback, but the trail ride with the wine tasting is our main offering.
So do you feel that you will evolve into doing this more full time?
So I have, yeah. So
Okay.
that's, I went from, when we started doing all of this, I was working full time and Chris was full time in the Air Force. He retired November of 2023. I went, mostly full time on the farm. For a while I was full time. I'm back to accounting like 2 days a week. Yes, so it has grown enough, and we've adjusted our pricing enough that it allows us to kind of make this, because we spend so much time on it. I was like, we spend way too much time on this to also then have to go to like another gig. Like this is way too time consuming to have a side hustle to support our family. So we're gonna raise our prices so that it can actually support our family. And I was nervous to do it because I was like, maybe nobody will go for that. But this is what it takes to actually support the cost of the farm, what it takes for the horses, because our corner, sort of what distinguishes us in the trail riding operation sphere is that we pride ourselves on being an ethical trail riding facility. So we take top-notch care of our trail horses. They get body work, they get acupuncture, chiropractic, kinesiology taping, massage. They're rotationally grazed. They have custom diets. They, we limit their working hours each week. So we really prioritize, they have a professional saddle fitter come out and make sure all their tack fits correctly, and so that they're not sore, from taking beginners around. Like, we treat them like they are competition horses, and they are, because in our minds, they are superstars, and it takes all the skill sets in the world to be a competent trail horse that takes beginners out safely from point A to point B and gets you there safely. People kind of discounts, I think, trail horses a lot, saying like, oh, it's not that hard to just like go on a trail. But there are so many variables and factors out there on a trail that, a $100,000 dressage horse couldn't handle safely, and so they're our family, and we want them and their bodies to last a long time. And so we don't want to run them into the ground and then run them through a sale barn sore or lame or anything like that. Like, when they're done, they retire on our farm, and they have a retired life, So I said I wasn't going to do this unless I could do it ethically and treat the horses the way I like to do it on my own personal horse, So that's what we really prioritize. And so all of that, means and having a farm right outside of DC means our prices have to reflect that. And I was a little concerned that maybe people wouldn't see the value there, but it hasn't phased them. I mean, people want a fun, unique experience that they can feel good about. And they know, like, hey, I'm participating in, an agritourism activity with animals, but I know that these animals are taken care of well, So
when you reflect, when you actually take a moment to reflect back at, that desire to be for horses to be part of your life and for you to be part of a horse's life. And now what you've created, what comes to mind? Like, how does it make you feel?
What comes to mind is that I try to now, as an adult, make my choices and decisions based on what would make my 10-year-old self happy, because I think my 10-year-old self is my true identity.
Such great advice.
And so at this point, I run any choice I make by that little girl and say, like, if I were to travel back in time and meet her and tell her what we're doing now, like, would she be excited about it, or would she be like, ugh? And I think she would be really happy to know that this is what we do with our lives. And so I think she manifested real hard this life, this job, this farm, these horses. Our herd is incredible. I can't say enough nice things about them. I have never met nicer horses and or happier horses. And I think, in terms of, when I look back on it, this is what I always knew that I wanted to do and knew that I would do. And I think people should, whatever their dream is, they should know that they can make it happen, because there's no way I should have been able to make this happen. But, if you want something bad enough, you can, your thoughts create your reality, right? So that's what I believe. And I just stayed focused on the end goal, and so I try to stay true to her.
One last question. I think that's beautiful. And I think that's such important advice. People need to hear that.
Thanks.
And very, very good message to get out there. I love that. One last question is, how do you know Shelby? Where's the connection there?
So I think the first time I met her, one of our things that we added after we had the horses, I was like, okay, we have all this land and all we're doing is riding horses through it. And I wanted to add something that would complement the horseback riding and that would also be sustainable. And anyway, we went through a lot of iterations, and because we also keep the horses in a regenerative manner. So sustainability and regenerative farming are very important to us. And we landed on pastured poultry. So we started pullets, pastured eggs, and pastured turkey and chicken. And we were at a vendor day at Jane Mark, and my husband and I had a little booth, and we were selling our chicken and eggs. And she came up and she was like, "Oh, you should be on the Maryland Meats listing, And I was like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, yeah, I think, she said that she worked at Smatic, and then she mentioned Robin Hill, and I was like, oh yeah, they're so close to us. And so, but it was a real brief interaction. And then she built a house right down the street from us, and somebody else said oh, the person who runs Smatic is your new neighbor. And I drove past it all the time, and I was like, oh, I need to get over there. And I put two and two together that it was her. And then she just reached out to me on Facebook or Instagram and was like, I have a horse and I've been wanting to kind of get back into riding, and I'm looking for some new farm friends. And I'm like, I'm looking for new farm friends too. And I'm like, yeah, you're right down the road. She's right. She's my neighbor. And so basically she just reached out and said hey, let's get together. Our kids are around the same age. So I have a 4-year-old, she has a 3-year-old. And so we were
same pains.
Yeah. And she was just like, hey, would you like to join the Smatic call and meeting? And I was like, yeah, I'm looking to get more involved. And then she invited me to the book club and, invited me tonight. And so, she just has been that proactive. So I am the person who am always like, I want more, friends, specifically women friends who are, even more specific in farming. But I am not the best at just preemptively reaching out to somebody. It's always a thing that's on my list to do, I want, but I just don't get around to it. And she seems the kind of person who builds community and just reaches out and brings you in and is like, hey, come join. And I didn't need much more encouragement than that. I was like, yes, thank you, I'm in, let's do it. So
that's great.
That's where we're at.
I'm glad you were here.
Yes, me too.
Pleasure meeting you.
You too.
Excited to look into your what you're doing and
thank you.
Look at the website.
I've been listening to your podcast episodes.
Excellent.
I started with the one about chocolate, which has been fascinating. Yes.
I have a whole journey, and I continue with that journey. I have some interesting interviews coming up.
I'd love
the thing for me.
I love the idea and the concept of the agritourism focus.
There's definitely something there. I don't know. We'll see where my journey takes me. I'm trusting the journey, as my friend Patty Baker says. But thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
and
you as well.
I love what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the interview.
I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agritourism.com. Until next time. So I was recently listening to one of the Grounded in Maine podcasts produced by Amy Fagan. The podcast is an open conversation about being mindful about how we show up in the world. It's focused on sustainability and how sustainability impacts every part of our life. What are some of the most important takeaways that people will get from your podcast?
One of the things that I hope that people will take away from the podcast is encouragement. Like, I want them to not feel like you have to spend thousands of dollars to be part of the solution, because, there are a lot of sustainable, things that say sustainability or sustainable, like solar panels or organic cotton and stuff like that. Like, some things are just more expensive because they have that tagline, that phrase or whatever. But there are so many ways that you can be sustainable. You just have to be a little bit creative. And so I'm putting out all these ideas that what people are doing, just to put the thought out there that we can all be part of it without going broke.
So how can people find your podcast?
My podcast is wherever podcasts are found. It is just called Grounded in Maine. I also have my Instagram is where I am most active, and the Instagram handle is Grounded in Maine Podcasts.